and Black home and South Carolina home offered housing. So it's just been a great group effort. I told the church on Sunday that I grew up with my mama reading stories to me every night from Hurlbut's Story of the Bible. And it was full of great stories, romance and war and tricksters. It also had lots of stories about refugees. And I remember the people who were enslaved by the Pharaoh, and Moses led them out looking for a land of promise. I also remember how Jacob's children, all his sons and their families, had famine, and they went to Egypt where they were welcomed by Joseph and were fed and welcomed. And then there was also a little guy born in a manger whose family fled as refugees from the terror of Herod's slaughter of the children. So I learned about refugees a long time, but I learned so much more when Stephanie Madison came and spoke to the Peace and Justice Committee. And Stephanie is a professor at Clemson. She's a former high school Spanish teacher, and she volunteers at El Refugio. Say it for me. I don't say it
El
right.
Refugio.
El Refugio.
There you go.
In
Lumpkin, Georgia.
Lumpkin, Georgia. So she's going to tell us a little bit about the context of the immigration crisis, and then about El Refugio. Mm-hmm. And hopefully we can find some opportunities for mission from our churches and presbytery. So I want you to welcome Stephanie.
Oh, thank you. All right, thank you so much. I walk around a lot as a teacher. So getting started, I titled this talk "Current Issues in Immigrant Detention and Humanitarian Responses," because I think it's important to have a better understanding of how we got to where we are in terms of immigration in the United States. I'm not saying I have the solution for immigration reform writ large, but I can tell you where we are having some major problems. And so getting started, I just kind of wanted to share how but a humble Spanish teacher raised in Cherryville, North Carolina, with Pastor Will.
Cherville.
If you're local. Yeah. How did I end up doing immigrant advocacy, right? Like it's a pretty long road to get from A to B. So I started as a high school Spanish teacher for 10 years. I had traveled and lived in different countries around the world, to practice my Spanish. Told my parents I needed to study abroad multiple times because how else are you going to learn? So I taught Spanish at North Carolina and South Carolina. And while I was a teacher, I got my master's degree. I did my national board certification, and then I thought, well, what's next? I guess a PhD. It's probably like a master's, but maybe just a little bit harder. So that's what I thought. So I had a real steep learning curve. But I got accepted at Clemson in the Literacy, Language, and Culture program. And so as a Spanish teacher, my initial interest was second language literacy and second language linguistics. So I started out as a student at Clemson, and we took all the introductory seminar classes, and I made a friend also named Will who was doing a lot of immigrant advocacy work way back in, this was 10 years ago, 2015, 2016. And he says, "Oh, so you're a Spanish teacher?" And I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "So you speak Spanish?" And I was like, "Yeah, I do." And so he said that he was doing visits at an immigrant detention center in Georgia, about 4 hours away from us in Clemson, in a town called Lumpkin, Georgia. It's 2 hours south of Atlanta, in the middle of nowhere. There's not a Walmart, a hotel, or nothing within 45 minutes around this detention center. And he said, we go and we visit with people whose family can't come. These are immigrants who 80% of them have committed no crime, but their paperwork is out of order. They overstayed a visa or something like that. And so I knew none of this, right? I just heard immigrant detention center, go do visits with people. And I thought, absolutely, you know what? I'm going to go be a good community helper and visit criminals in this prison. And so I'm like, but they're Spanish speaking criminals. I will be a good community helper. Absolutely. So I go to Stewart, it's called Stewart's Detention Center. Until recently, it was the largest detention center in the United States. They have about 2,000 beds. There's a couple that are bigger than that now being built across the country. And so I go. And so I had never been in a prison before for any reason. So this was all very new to me. And so we get there, we're briefed, you know, this is how you behave in the waiting room. This is how, how you get through security, yada, yada. And so we go, and it was just like in the movies, right? Like you have the window and you have the phone and you both pick up the phone. And the first person I ever visited was an 18-year-old kid who was from California, and he was brought to the United States as a toddler, had just graduated high school. And this kid, he rolled a stop sign in his car, and that was enough to get pulled over. And the police officer was like, "Oh, you're 18? Okay, looks here like you are here illegally." Took him, put him in a detention facility. And so this kid was bounced across the country to different facilities until he ended up in Georgia. And this kid is in there with all these grown men, just scared to death. He's like, my Spanish isn't even that great. He's like, I speak with my family, but I was raised American, and they're going to take me to Mexico, and I've never been since I was 2. So this kid was scared to death. And I had just been transitioning out of teaching high school where I taught 18-year-olds. So I was just sick about it. It just broke my heart. And, after that visit, I cried the whole way, all 4 hours home. And I was just so heartbroken because in my mind, it was going to be hardened criminals, right? People had just thrown them in there, thrown away the key, and I was going to go, do this really hard service. But it was basically a child. And that right there changed my whole approach to learning about the immigration system. And it was then that I started to look into it and how 78 to 80% at any given time in any given detention facility are people who've never been accused of a crime or convicted of a crime other than their paperwork is out of order. Perhaps they were brought here as a 2-year-old, so their whole life has been breaking the law. Perhaps they had a visa and overstayed, didn't get it renewed in time. Well, if you let it expire and you don't get it renewed in time, too bad, so sad, you're going to be deported and you have to start all over. So there's very little room for grace in the paperwork procedures. Okay, and so that is what I learned. People who've tried to do the right thing, people who've gotten lawyers, who filed as much as they can, only to end up in these detention centers. So I once again had a steep learning curve, and that was my first introduction to immigrant detention. And here we are. So it's been close to 10 years, and I'm still volunteering. I still go down and visit with people. The facility is now over capacity, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But that's how I got started. And just because a friend said, "You should come, you speak Spanish," and I went knowing nothing about nothing. And so here we are. I now am a lecturer at Clemson. I work in the College of Education. And what I research and publish on is immigration and education and how they intersect and how it affects not only students, how it affects teachers, because I do a lot of teacher training for pre-service teachers. So why does this matter, right? So from an educator's perspective, it matters a great deal. When people say schools are politically neutral spaces, I'm like, right, well, you tell that to the kid whose mom's being deported while she's here. It's going to affect the kids, so as a teacher, it's going to affect you. That's true for healthcare. That's true for churches. That's true everywhere. So we can try to be politically neutral all we want to, but when it affects the lives of people around us, you really can't escape it. So today, I wanted to talk a little bit more about the immigrant detention system that I learned over the years, and then about my work with El Refugio, which is, you can call it the refuge if you want. One of the founders can't say refugio, so he calls it the refuge still. And then what's next, right? So what do we do about all of this? And so the first thing I wanted to talk about was when we talk about immigrant detention centers. These have only been around for the past 20, 30 some odd years, okay? In the United States, there is a very robust private prison system, right? And what happens is the government contracts with these prisons to house criminals. But about 20 years ago, two in particular, they're called Core Civic and Geo Group, and they are these huge conglomerates, and they were like, you know what? What if we expanded into immigrant detention? Technically, immigrant detention is not meant to be punitive. It's meant to hold people there so they make sure they go to their court date, because these slippery immigrants are going to get away and not go to their court dates. So that was the rationale behind it. Now, there's no research to back up that it was needed, but that was the argument. So these two conglomerates, Core Civic and Geo Group, expanded into immigrant detention, and it turns out that is extremely lucrative. Why is it lucrative? Okay, well, what happens is the U.S. government, decides that this group of people needs to be incarcerated. If they've committed a crime, yeah, that's where they go. But what if they overstay a visa, right? What if they cross the border illegally 25 years ago? Can we lock them up too? And they said, yeah, actually, we probably could. So they start arresting people and putting them in these facilities. So your tax dollars go to these facilities to house the migrants there, again, under the premise of to make sure they go to their court date. So when you have this model, there is little incentive to spend even a penny more than you have to. So the difference is with American citizens who are incarcerated, they have a right to an attorney. They have a right to, exercise, libraries, food. I mean, it's not great, but edible food, healthcare, medicine, those types of things, okay? Immigrants do not have any of those rights. They do not have a right to an attorney. They do not have a right for materials to be presented to them in a language they understand. They do not have a right to healthcare. They don't have a right to complain. It's a very different system, right? And so if these corporations are like, okay, well, if we can get away with buying low quality food, right? Like meat that's rejected from dog food corporations, and we can feed it to people for pennies, that's what we're going to do, because look, we fed them. We did it. And so they're scraping just by to do the minimal possible amount. So it's not uncommon for, and this is a nationwide problem. It's not just at Stewart, but it has gone on for decades. There's often maggots in the food. It's typically inedible, but technically they're being fed. Same thing with healthcare. Medical neglect is a huge reason that people die in these detention facilities. Another thing that these corporations do is they wait until someone is so sick, they go to the hospital and they die at the hospital. Oh, we didn't have anything to do with that. But on the other hand, there is a lot of abuse, a lot of human rights abuses in every way you can think of. Excessive use of solitary confinement, for example, particularly with people with mental illness. So you have a lot of people who take their own lives in these facilities as well. So the human rights abuses are vast and extremely well documented for years and years across the 200 private institutions we have across this nation. So the fact that it's funded by our tax dollars, though, you're kind of like, well, that doesn't seem right. Like, if we have it well documented and all this is going on, why is nobody in the government saying anything about it? Oh, well, they are. So we send out, inspectors general. Thank you. Inspectors general to these different facilities, and they'll go in and they'll be like, your nursing station is dirty. You do not have any medication beyond Tylenol. You need to fix this. Okay, your kitchen is not clean. You do not have any fresh fruits or vegetables. You need to fix this. I've talked to some detainees who haven't been outside in the yard for a month. You need to fix this. And so they write this report, and it's publicly available to you. I always tell my students, fact check me. I encourage you to fact check this. You can pull up these inspection reports. And so the inspectors general, like, okay, so here's all the things that are wrong. And Core Civic takes that and says, thank you so much. Okay, bye. And that's it. That's the end of it. There's no part of the contracting with the government. In the contract is that the government cannot impose penalties because the corporations say, well, listen, you're charging us with housing all these people. We're going to do it our way. And the government's like, well, that sounds self-policing. All right. So they have these reports and they say, cool, right on that. And then obviously nothing ever changes. The same is true for abuses by guards. As you can imagine, with the female detainees, sexual assault is rampant. There was, in fact, a detention center in Folkestone, Georgia, about 5 years ago that was closed because it was all female detainees. One of the doctors was performing sterilization procedures on the women without their consent, because, again, you don't have to provide information in a language they can understand. So that place was closed down. And so, again, what the problem is, when you know these abuses are happening and somebody gives a report of these abuses happening and they say, well, we self-police, we take care of it internally, there's nothing that's done. And so the human rights abuses are rampant, well documented. They go on and on and on, and it's heartbreaking because you think this can't be happening in the United States. The question I get is that seems like it's not legal. I'm like, well, that's because it's not legal. It is not only against our laws as a country, it's against international human rights laws, and they are broken daily and has been this way for decades. So that is how it works, okay? That is how it's funded, and that is what happens, and that's how these corporations are reaping billions of dollars in profits. You can buy stock in these companies. If you have a stock portfolio, I've had friends tell me, you know what, I have a guy and he just invests in whatever. I'm gonna make sure I'm not invested in Core Civic and Geo Group. But I tell you, the stocks are booming. They're making money hand over fist, and the government just proposed $1 billion to build more facilities. Guess who's getting those contracts? So that's the system. And so once we understand that this all happened because of a corporate idea to make money, it all kind of starts to make a little bit more sense. When you get into the political side of it, corporations can give money as a lobbyist. So this is perpetuated, how it's funded, by our tax dollars, but you can look up, as a website, it's called opensecrets.org, and you can pull up industries and you can see how much they've donated over the years, and it kind of tracks who got it, Republicans or Democrats, how much. And over the years, between Core Civic and Geo Group, they've donated probably close to $100 million by now to different political campaigns, et cetera, et cetera. So what did they get in exchange for that campaign financing? They get stricter laws. So let's pretend it is not illegal for a person to have a driver's license, even if they're not a citizen. Like, you can have a driver's license, so we know you're insured, you're going to be a safe driver, even if your citizenship or your residency or green card's expired. For the good of the community, we'll let you have a driver's license so we can keep tabs on your driving. Well, one day, one of these lobbyists is like, what if we made that illegal? What if we made having a license illegal? And these people who are driving around going to work, well, now they're doing something illegal. They can't have that license. What if we did that? Well, now at every traffic stop, you got a case to arrest someone. And so the politicians and lawmakers say, thank you, CoreCivic, that is an excellent idea. Thank you for that donation. We'll be making that law happen. And that is how the system has just gotten more and more grotesque over the years, is that little by little they chip away at the daily activities of people who are undocumented. Again, it does not matter if you have been here since you were a baby, if you've been here 50 years, if you've never once committed a crime, you never even got a traffic speeding ticket. I mean, I might have gotten one this very day. But if they've never even gotten a speeding ticket, they're still considered illegal because little by little their daily life has been criminalized. So that's where rhetoric really comes into play, that when we call people illegals, you'll hear it on the news all the time, these illegals, it really is going to depend on your definition of illegal. You know, it's like, is it illegal if your green card expires and you don't renew it? No. Technically, that's a misdemeanor on equivalency with like jaywalking. You know, it's not technically a crime for your paperwork to lapse. However, when we criminalize that in the public's mind, and we say that's a crime, people start associating these people with violence. And they start associating these people with drugs. And I'm like, really? You should be associating it with the mom dropping off her kids at soccer practice, because that's who's in the detention facilities for the most part. But it's gotten convoluted, right? And so when you keep moving the goalpost and you're like, okay, well, now this is illegal, now this is illegal, now this is illegal, no wonder so many people have been arrested. And so that is how it works. And that leads me to what's going on now. So we've all seen in the news ICE arrests, violence, all these types of things. And so why are there so many now? So the reason there are so many is because the corporations, like these conglomerates, they get paid per bed, all right? And so the goal is to fill the beds. The problem is, if you have a goal, let's say we're going to arrest 1,000 illegal criminals a day, there's just not enough people in the country who are both immigrants and violent criminals, right? Like there's just not that many. Statistically, immigrants are less likely to commit a violent crime than a native-born American. Statistically, when there's an immigrant community, it is safer than a community without immigrants. So you gotta have butts in beds, right? We gotta get these bodies in beds. So here's the problem, okay? We will see, and I'm sure you've all seen it, a person who is an American citizen, a person who is a legal green card holder. There was just a guy who was a superintendent of schools who was arrested, okay? There have been people, we have it on film, saying, I carry my paperwork, here's my green card, here's my ID, here's my paperwork. And ICE says, we don't care. Why don't they care? Why is ICE not saying, okay, my bad? Here's why. We're going to go back to butts in beds. So if they arrested me tomorrow and I say, I am an American citizen, and they say, yeah, I heard you speaking in Spanish, we'll work it out later. I'm like, well, here's my license, here's my birth certificate, you know? They'll say, yeah, we'll work it out later. So for the week to 2 weeks that I am held in a detention center, the detention center is getting paid for each night that I am there. So if it takes them 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, to be like, oh, our bad, you are a citizen, you can go on now. Well, in that meantime, I might have lost my job, might have missed a mortgage payment. Where are my kids? So the mistaken identities of arresting citizens and people who have documents and people who are here, legally again, for now until the goalpost is moved again, people who've done nothing wrong are still getting picked up because it's not about that. It's not about safety. It's about bodies in beds, paid per bed. And so when you look at it that way, you're like, oh, well, no wonder they don't care. Because from a logical perspective, you're like, well, a police officer should care if you're handing them evidence that you're not doing anything wrong. They should care. Nope, that's not what it's about. It's not what it's about. So once you understand that, it all makes more sense, right? So, what are the consequences? If I got arrested tomorrow by ICE, which I do have a mouth on me, so that is not out of the realm of possibility. But if I get put in a detention center and I'm held there for 2 weeks and I can't call a lawyer because, oh, yeah, you're not entitled to phone calls, you have to pay for those. You don't get money in there unless you work a job for $1 a day. So I can't get a hold of anybody. I don't have a job mopping floors and cleaning toilets. I don't have a way to let my family know where I am. So I'm left there for 2-3 weeks until this is all sorted out. What happens to those officers who did that to me? And the answer is nothing. Nothing. Because when the goal is you get me 3,000 bodies in beds across this country, I need 3,000 arrests and 3,000 bodies in beds. You're going to get those 3,000 bodies in beds. So the consequences are none. Another reason for that is because when you have a hierarchical structure, right, like you have police officers and the police chief, et cetera, there's a face that you can talk to. There's a person you can kick up your complaint to. But because all of this is being funneled through corporate conglomerates, you can call Stewart Detention Center and that phone will ring for the next 50 years. Like they're not going to answer that phone. There's nobody to complain to. And because ICE is not a typical police force, right? They don't have police training. They don't have de-escalation training because that's not their purpose, right? Remember the purpose, put bodies in beds. That's the purpose. So they do not have the same training as other professionals, as other law enforcement. And so that is why there are no consequences because they're not in a hierarchical structure with oversight, right? So that's the reason. And so the consequences for the families left behind, and this is where my work kind of comes into play. The consequences are devastating. When you have a mom or a dad who is locked up, what's funny is so many of these people are locked up because they were picked up at their jobs. So, I mean, people from all over. I've met with a minister who was detained. I met once with a guy who he was a horse trainer for an equine therapy camp for children with special needs. I met with a guy, he worked for AT&T laying cable. I worked for, you name it, artists, teachers, nurses. All of these people have been picked up and they're like, I don't know how am I in this prison? And so you have all these people who are members of the community and have families that they support, and the people left behind are just absolutely shattered, particularly the children. And that leads me to my next point. So one of the places that I do spend a lot of time, the El Refugio, or the refuge. So this is the house. It is located 1 mile from Stewart Detention Center in Lumpkin, Georgia. And this house was a gift from a comedian named Samantha Bee. I don't know if you recall The Daily Show with Jon Stewart. Okay, well, Samantha Bee had her own spinoff show about 10 years ago, y'all. It was called Full Frontal with Samantha Bee. And when she did this show, she did a series called Holidays on Ice, talking about ICE and the impact around the country. And so she discovered El Refugio. Now, when I started volunteering with them in 2015, 2016, they had a tiny little house. We call it the Little Yellow House. I mean, it was smaller than this room. It had 1 bedroom with like 4 bunk beds, had 1 bathroom that worked some of the time, tiny little kitchen, tiny little living room. And it was a place where people could go and stay. When they're traveling hours and hours to visit their loved one, this is a place that they can go and they can stay. At the house, you could also get clothes. It does not matter if you drove 100 hours. If you go to the detention facility and you have a hole in your jeans, no, you can't. You don't meet dress code. So we kept clothes. You have to have closed-toed shoes. You have to have your shoulders covered. You have to have this. You have to have that. So we kept clothes so people could come and change clothes and go back. Some people just wanted to have something to eat because, again, there's nothing within, an hour drive. And so after Samantha Bee heard about this, our tiny little yellow house, her team bought this house. in Lumpkin. And it's a historical house built in 1920s, and it is gorgeous, and I'm obsessed with it because it is so nice. She furnished it. We have multiple bedrooms, multiple bathrooms, multiple showers, multiple closets with clothes. And so when somebody does drive 6-7 hours and they get to the detention center, like, okay, I want to put my name on the list to visit my brother, my husband, my sister, and they say, ooh, list is full up for today, they can come to the house and they can spend the night for free. And we have toothbrushes, everything you need. And so this house, it serves multiple purposes. So the first, as I just mentioned, is the hospitality house, okay? And so at the hospitality house, what I do is I am what's called a coordinator. I say I'm the house boss. Mm-hmm. So every weekend, every Saturday and Sunday, we have a house boss, a house coordinator. And then we have a team of volunteers who will come and spend the night. So they'll get there Saturday morning and then until Sunday afternoon. And so what do these volunteers do? Well, we greet people and bring them in. We always have coffee going, snacks, sandwiches. We give out $25 gas cards. And sometimes that's the only reason people come in. Like, I'll see them in the parking lot at the detention center and I'm like, hey, goodbye. We'll give you a gas card. And I'm like, okay, seems fake, but. So we get them in and we say, hey, we are here to serve you. You drove 10 hours, why don't you go take a nap? You got kids, we got a play area. So sometimes as a volunteer, your job is to let a 5-year-old tell you all about their, adventures with Barbies. Sometimes your job is to prepare dinner for the families. Sometimes your job is to sit at the kitchen table and just listen. And that happens a lot. The families start to share stories. A lot of the families exchange information and now they carpool down together. But more and more, as the Stewart Detention Center continues to be overcrowded, we get more and more first-timers, is what I call them, who are shocked. And they'll say things like, "Why? I mean, I'm an advocate for immigration control. We don't want criminals in our country. I never thought they would arrest my son-in-law. I never thought my neighbor would be here. She's a lady at my church. I can't believe she's here." And so the rhetoric of, well, some people just want open borders and they want the cartel in the United States. I'm like, who? Nate, tell me a name. Like, who wants that? The people who are detained, they say the same thing. They're like, I am fleeing cartel violence for the safety of my children. Why on earth would I not want a vetting process? We all want a vetting process. And they say, I want to be vetted because I haven't done anything wrong. But we're not even giving them that opportunity. So that's what we do at the house. We stay overnight. The next day we make breakfast. And then we stay throughout the afternoon as people come by. Some people come by and they're like, I just want to use the bathroom and grab a gas card and a sandwich. And they're like, okay. Some people come and they take a shower. Some people stay, it's just, we are there to be whatever is needed at that house. And a lot of times it just is sitting and listening. So the second thing that we do at the house is we do humanitarian visits at the detention facility. And that is how I started. We just went down for the day, went and did these visits at the detention facility and went home. But little by little over the years, I started to be an overnight volunteer. And then I realized they needed more coordinators because we only have about a team of maybe 8 of us, maybe 9. I go down about once a month because I feel so helpless otherwise. So I've been going once a month. And we just run the house. And so as a volunteer, you also have the option to visit a person at the detention facility. These are people whose family has contacted us or somebody else in the facility has contacted us and they say, hey, I really need you to go check on my aunt, or I really need you to go check on my dad. He's really depressed, or she hasn't gotten her medication, or, she's been having panic attacks, or whatever it may be. And we go check on these people and we sit down, you get a 1-hour visit. People are allowed one 1-hour visit once per week. And so if their family can't come, we go. And so we have a list of people that we go and we make notes, right? So if it's somebody with health concerns, we'll check on them. If it's somebody with who's having a really hard time, like sometimes you'll meet with someone and they just sob, they just cry. And sometimes you'll meet with people and they're like nervous. They don't know when their deportation date's going to happen. Sometimes you just don't know. But your job as a humanitarian visitor is to just listen and just tell them, listen, I know you feel like you're forgotten and nobody knows you're here, but we're here. Another thing that we do is we put commissary money on people's accounts. Why do we put commissary money? Because the food is rotten. They also don't really give you supplies. Things like they'll give you like soap, shampoo, but if you run out. For women, feminine hygiene products, you got to buy most of. They'll give you like, I don't know, 2 per week or something. So you have to buy them. You have to buy minutes to call out on the phone. It's usually about the prices are exorbitant within the facility because they can be, so you'll pay, I don't know, $4 for a Snickers or something, $5 for a Snickers. Why not? What are they going to do? Complain? So we put money on their commissary if they request it, if they do not have family members to do that. And so while we're there at the facility, I walk around with a pocket full of cards, and you'll see people sleeping in their cars because they often wait 4 or 5 hours for their visit time. There's no bathroom in the facility, so if you're in the waiting area, you can't take a book, you can't take a phone. You can sit there in silence, but those people just sit in their cars. So I'll like knock on windows and be like, hey, you want to come wait at the house? Like, we got food, we got bathrooms, like, we got $25 gas cards. And like, okay. So we lure them in, and then they're just shocked. These people are absolutely shocked. And I was there this past weekend. I got home last night, and one of the ladies there, she has 2 little girls, ages 7 and 8, and they drove from Kannapolis to Lumpkin, Georgia, so 6-7 hours with 2 little girls. They stayed the night. And she was just in tears. People are so defeated that, kindness, it's big. So that's what we do. We visit people. We donate money to their accounts. We used to purchase books, but you had to get it sent from like Amazon or Barnes & Noble directly there. I'm like, I get it, security, that's fine. Well, Core Civic did away with that because you can buy it through their bookstore. And we had a friend, like one of the volunteers was like, yeah, the guy I visited requested a Bible. So I went to their website to buy it, and it was $70. And so we can no longer offer people books because the entire decade I've been doing this, when I ask people, what if we could get anything for you, what do you need? Sometimes they'll say commissary. Sometimes they'll say, can you, call my daughter and tell her this? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Oh, but 99 times out of 100, they ask for books. And we can't do that anymore. So again, it's the goalpost keeps moving. The goalpost keeps moving. And so I hate to, when people ask what my academic research is about, I'm like, it's the saddest stuff on earth. I'm real fun at parties, but this is the reality. This is the reality. And so, over the years, I've gotten a lot better about, crying and being emotional there, because it's like, well, nobody wants my white tears. I don't have anybody in there. I'm not losing a parent. But this year, it's been, so that's, got me at the end. But that's it. That's what we're doing. So your donations go to the house. And so what does your money pay for? Your money pays for food, because I joke when people, come in for the first time, I'm like, the fridge is yours, go get whatever you want. And after they've come a couple of weeks, you'll see the kids go, they have a little drawer, I put the little kid stuff in, they know where it's at. But I'm like, my job is to buy groceries on the way down as the house boss and get rid of every single one. Like, it's to cook for you, to give things to you. All of our gas cards, we have been so fortunate that a lot of church groups and humanitarian organizations have been collecting those. My job is to get rid of them. My job is to make that box zero so we can get rid of them and give them to people. Also, this house was built in 1920, and so we may or may not sometimes have like a stray bat or a stray leak or a stray, you don't ever know. So we do spend some of that money fixing stuff up, but that is always the bottom of the barrel. So every time I'm there, I'm like, I gotta bring my caulk gun. I gotta, I'll see it, but we immediately fork it over. Like we immediately hand it over, and so that is what we do. The people who come are shocked. They're like, "Is this your job? Do you get paid to do this?" I was like, I work in the College of Education, so I make millions doing that. So but no, they're just shocked people give up their time. And I'm like, listen, not everybody can do this, okay? Not everybody can give up a weekend, drive however many. Again, they're isolated by design. Getting a visit is difficult by design. Like they don't want people in there to bear witness. So it's difficult all the way around. It's traumatic to talk to these people's families. It's traumatic when you're watching kids play and they'll tell you things like, oh, this is the jail, but the good guys are in the jail and the bad guys are outside. Because my dad's a good guy, but he's in there. And he didn't do anything wrong. He just wasn't born here. And you're just like, oh, this 5-year-old's going to get me. So so the work is not for everybody, and that's fine. I also go to the border, to the Texas-Mexico border, to the camps where people remain in Mexico, where kids are outside, months on end waiting for an appointment. I've done that. Again, that's not for everybody. I just have a, sense of a bubble around me. I'm like, I'll be fine. Cartels around, but I'm blonde. I'm clearly not from here. I'll be fine. So this work is not for everybody, but everybody can do something. Everybody can do something. And so I always welcome visitors to El Refugio. Even if you don't speak Spanish, it's fine. But again, the work is not always glamorous, but it is whatever we are needed, whatever we need to do. And so to wrap up, my students always tease me and say I have Dr. Madison-isms that I always say. And so I always say, even if we cannot dismantle the entire system today, it does not absolve us from trying. The problem seems so huge. We're up against billion-dollar industries. We're not going to dismantle it today, but that does not absolve us from doing what we can do. And so I always tell them, once you see it, you can't unsee it. Like once you know this, you can never unknow this, and it will make you look at everything in a different way. And with that, I'm open for Mary Jo. Would you like to say some words before we open for questions?
Well, why don't we have maybe 10 to 15 minutes for questions, and then I'll close us with prayer.
Okay.
Does that sound good?
All right. Okay. So questions. Yes.
So ideally, this detention is about making people go to their court dates.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if you could speak to how long of a wait that makes.
Okay, the question is, so if the premise is to make sure they go to their court dates, okay, which is ironic because they've been picking people up at their court dates. Yeah. But again, if you're trying to think logically, you'd be like, that doesn't make any sense. But if you think, oh, that's a body in a bed, there it is. Okay, so once they're in the facility, part of the strategy of population control is chaos and withholding information. So one of the things we hear a lot when we visit is people are frustrated. They have not been given a court date with the judge. Oh, by the way, at Stewart, the courthouse is attached to the facility. They do not like public witnesses coming in. You have every right to be there, but they will give you a hard time about it. So you can bear witness, but they don't like it. So they don't tell you. They don't tell you just one day you'll get a notice. It's okay, you're going to see the judge this day. Well, what if I don't have a lawyer? What if I don't know? Well, you have to represent yourself. You go before the judge. The judge determines if you have a credible asylum claim or not. And so up until recent years, Stewart had about a 97% deportation rate. If you got a judge at a facility in, let's say, New York, those judges had about a 15% deportation rate. So there's a lawyer, his house is a couple houses down from Refugio named Marty, and so he has been working alongside El Refugio all along. And so he'll be able to say, well, if you get this judge, it's really not even worth your time. They don't give asylum claims, no matter what, no matter the evidence. They just don't do it. So, however, there is a new judge in the circuit at Stewart who does spend a lot of time looking over the evidence. Now, it might end in a deportation, but I'm hoping that the presence of another judge tempers the other two who have been there. And I mean, this is an awful thing to say to somebody when they say, Steph, what do you think? Like, what do you think his chances are? And I'm like, slim to none, but I'm not gonna be the one to say that, you know? So not giving them information, changing the dates, it's all part of the chaos to keep people on edge and uninformed. And that's a strategy for control. Yes.
In the beginning of your presentation, you talked about the corporation.
Yes.
ICE kind of being an agent, if you will, of the corporation.
Mm-hmm.
Can you expand on that a little bit, that connection?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what's fun about that ICE / corporation system is nobody's in charge. So if someone is picked up by ICE, they're roughed up, they're dumped at the facility injured, ICE is already gone. They've already dropped them off. They're out of there. The people who are within the facility are employed by the corporation. Okay. So the guards at the front who allow you to visit, again, your visit depends a lot on their mood. And so, again, I've gotten to know them over the years. So I'm like, oh, so-and-so's there and she's a hot one today or whatever. Those people have nothing to do with ICE. ICE drops them off and picks them up, and that's it. And so when you say, well, there's abuses within the system with those guards, ICE has nothing to do with it. ICE is abusing people outside of the gates. CoreCivic has nothing to do with it. So the two don't really cross that much. ICE is simply being paid by your tax dollars to scoop people up. CoreCivic is being paid by your tax dollars to hold them. And so they don't really cross as much as you would think because they're employed by by the government versus a corporation. But the payment's the same. Either way, it's your tax dollars.
Have you come up with anything in your public records research with that connects ICE? That pretty much states specifically that ICE is the net.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. In fact, hold that thought. Like any teacher, highbrow resources. Okay, so there are 3 books. I'll come back over. So there are 3 books that I would recommend. One is called Immigration Detention, Inc., The Big Business of Locking Up Migrants. And this is basically my talk in much greater detail that goes with a lot more information. The other one, this is what we are reading as the coordinators at El Refugio. And this is called Unbuild Walls, Why Immigrant Justice Needs Abolition. And so this is what we are reading as coordinators, and it's a little bit more hopeful. And then the last one, this is my book. It's called Flying Kites, Narratives of Prison Literacies in Essays and Art. And I have a chapter in here. And so this book is about how literacy is a form of dignity, how education is a form of dignity, and that's why it's withheld from people. And so my chapter is about literacy practices in immigrant detention spaces where they desperately want books, they desperately want English classes, and how withholding that is a human rights abuse. And so if you don't want to buy my whole book, the chapter is available for free at Clemson. You just Google, Flying Kites, Stephanie Madison, Clemson chapter, and you can get the chapter. The chapter is called Postcards and Chemistry Books is the name of the chapter. And it's free to download my chapter because I uploaded it to Clemson. So I don't know if the publisher knows. So, yes.
What kind of structure do you have to keep the El Refugio going, do you have a board of directors?
There is a board of directors for El Refugio, yes. We have our founding team who started it, about a decade ago. Amilcar has been our director the whole time, was like his brainchild. But the folks who were the ones who got it off the ground, one of them, he is a business person who manages like the finances and the taxes and the fundraising and the strategic campaigns and all that. So there is a board of directors, and they do from time to time serve as house coordinators. But the boots on the ground folk, like I said, there's only 8 or 10 of us who are the house bosses, and we just rotate, and then volunteers, just whoever we can get to show up for a weekend.
Have you had any particular churches that were supportive?
Multiple churches have been supportive, yes. I had, so it is common, for example, for church groups to come like on a Saturday and do visits at the detention facility. But also I've had, like, we usually have about 4 to 5 overnight volunteers. And so groups from different churches will drive down, from North Carolina, from all over, to spend a weekend, which we are very grateful for. Again, I had been there one weekend. I took one of my undergrad students because she was interested in this work. She's training to be a Spanish teacher. So of course she's my favorite. And so she rode down with me, and we had a team signed up, and that team didn't come. And that weekend it was me and Olivia, my 21-year-old student, and we ran the house. We did it. I'm gonna do it. We're gonna do the thing. But yes, churches have been very gracious. Like, people who come to volunteer have been excellent about bringing gas cards, food, snacks, whatever the house needs. People have been very gracious. And the more people learn about it, the more it's like, this is direct support. Like, the $25 gas cards, like next weekend, is going directly to the hands of a family member or loved one. I'm out of time.
Well, what's the best way to contact? Let's say you have a church.
Yeah.
So that's something that I'm very.
Yeah. So to get involved, their website, you would just go to Google and put El Refugio Stewart. And so El Refugio Stewart, and the website will pop up. And there's a couple of tabs I recommend. One of the tabs is resources, and they have written reports. Several places have written reports. The Southern Poverty Law Center has written reports about this place, but El Refugio's resources, they have reports that they have compiled about Stewart. There's a volunteer tab where you can put in your information about what type of volunteering you would like to do, and then there's a donate button as well. Yes, ma'am.
I know you volunteer on the weekends because you're working full time.
Yeah.
But what about during the week? Do they have the house open during the week for people?
We do not have the staff for that.
So there's no way.
Now, it is possible. So as a professor, I have a lot of flexibility because I teach some of my classes in person and some of my classes are online, like my master's classes are online. So if there's ever a group that was like, we want to go down on a Tuesday, like, I can open the house and we can go down and visit on a Tuesday. Like, I cancel classes. I got a principal. All right. Do you want me to take any more questions, or?
Let's pull it to a close.
Okay. Pastor Will?
I'll make sure this next, I think it's too late for this week, but next week, what's going on throughout the presbytery, I'll get John to put links to the refuge.
The refuge. Mm-hmm.
She used to sound like this.
I did. Listen.
Along with the particular link she has recommended. And that way, anybody who wants to look at it, if you're in the email list, which your church should be, you can click save with a tab. And if you don't know how to do that, call me. I'll walk you through it.
Okay.
And
I want us to.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Amazing. So I want a couple announcements. If anybody drove here and you're too sleepy to drive home, Martha and Gil Campbell have 2 bedrooms and a bathroom, and William Brown and Mary Jo Clark have 2 bedrooms and a bathroom. And we put fresh sheets on today, so you're welcome to spend the night. Anybody is welcome to join us at the Huckleberry tomorrow morning for coffee at 9, and Stephanie's going to meet with us. And my dream is that we will take this idea home with us and find out ways that Montreat Pres and Black Mountain Pres and our presbytery can get on board to support these people and offer them solace and comfort. So, yeah, I think that's not something we can figure it all tonight, but I hope you'll sleep on it, pray about it, come for coffee, and we'll see what we can do. So I want to close with something, and where's Vivian? Vivian used this as the anthem on Sunday. Jamie Bobby Lloyd preached, and this was the anthem. Have you heard God's voice? Has your heart been stirred? Oh, yes. Thank you. Have you heard God's voice? Has your heart been stirred? Are you still prepared to follow? Have you made a choice to remain and serve, though the way be rough and narrow? Will you use your voice? Will you not sit down when the multitudes are silent? Will you make a choice to stand your ground when the crowd is turning violent? Will you watch the news with the eyes of faith and believe it could be different? Will you share your views using words of grace? Will you leave a thoughtful imprint? Will you listen to the voiceless? Will you stop and eat? And when friendships start, will you share your hope with the hopeless? Have you heard God's voice? Has your heart been stirred? Have you heard God's voice? Thank y'all so much for being here tonight. Thank you to Stephanie.
Thank you.
Thank you to Will Upchurch, who discovered her, and to the Committee on Peace and Justice, and to the churches. Thank you so much, and thank y'all for being here. Good night, and hope you'll come for coffee.
I'm
at
staying
9
here.
at the